This is the Alpha Evolution. I'm your host, Justin Adams. Today, we're going to talk about simp syndrome or nice guy syndrome. And it's a fairly common topic. It's been around for a while, but there's what do they say? There's a new one born every day. So there's always going to be somebody who's coming into this world, a young man who doesn't understand what's going on. And a lot of times, nice guys will not realize that they're nice guys. They get they get conditioned by their parents. They get conditioned by society, and they don't even know what they are. And they just think that dating is supposed to be full of pain. They think that being a man is supposed to be full of pain, and really, they just are lacking a certain level of awareness, mostly of themselves. So let's get into it. So first, we'll talk about just the basic definition, right? And what I've come up with is the most basic definition of a simp, or also known as a nice guy, is a man who over prioritizes the desires of a woman to the detriment of his own well-being. The terms nice guy and nice guy syndrome are used to describe men who view themselves as prototypical nice guys, but whose nice deeds are in reality only motivated by attempts to passively please women into a relationship or into sex. Their strategy is essentially based on the belief that his niceness should be rewarded with sex, which is actually a form of covert sexism, if you think about it. So let's look at common traits. Common traits of that lead to egocentric simpism, because actually being a simp is in truth a very egocentric place to be. Okay. So more on that later though. So some typical characteristics is overgiving of their time, their resources, money, feelings, and attention. They also have a need to fix other people's problems. Now that's not to be confused with a guy who wants to help his friends. This is someone who does this too much, right? They get into other people's problems to try to fix them because really they're trying to make make the person perceive them as something to be cherished, something noteworthy. Like they're really not doing it for the sake of helping somebody. They're doing it so that they can improve their own self-image. They also have a need to caretake, right? Which are placating efforts to secure validation. Again, similar to helping with people's problems. They habitually are repressing their feelings. All right, and this can lead to explosive events. And this is where you see, a guy who has unrequited love, or he's not getting any attention from women, and then they go in with a firearm into a school and start shooting and stuff like that. They are dishonest with their true intentions, and they're quite secretive. Now, this is a very important trait because this is sort of the crux of the nice guy syndrome. They don't really have trust in themselves. They don't think that they are really of high value. So they but so that they don't have the ability to come across truthfully and honestly with what they want, especially from women. So then what happens is they are dishonest with their true intentions, right? And they're secretive with their true feelings. And so this will be the guy who tries to be good friends with a woman, and in the idea that he's going to become close to her intimately at some point, and he's just waiting for the right opportunity. He tries to come across as perfect and without fault as a means of distancing themselves from any possibility of rejection. So they spend a lot of time and effort to make sure that there's really nothing rejectable about them. And again, this has to do with a deep disassociation with their true self, and in the heart of hearts, they really don't have a very high level of self-esteem. And which brings me to the next characteristic is secretly they're filled with a lot of blame and shame. And this will never be expressed to others, maybe to their therapist or something like that, if they have the courage to get one. So, but in any other case, they're not going to be talking about their feelings. They're not going to be talking about really how they feel about themselves. And usually, it's a very uh, poor level of personal regard. They always think failures are their fault, but again, they won't express this to other people, but they will feel it. They'll constantly be feeling that things are uh, that things that go wrong are due to themselves. They harbor secret contracts, so deep down they believe that they're owed preferential treatment for their good deeds. And Dr. Robert Glover, who wrote this great book called No More Mr. Nice Guy, I highly suggest you check it out. They believe that they're owed this treatment, um, and Dr. Glover calls this covert contracts. So so a guy will think I'm owed a kiss because I took a girl out to a dinner and we called it a date. I deserve sex because a woman went on a date with me. I deserve a woman's attention because I helped her move. There's all these sort of things, and they're covert because they're not really telling the other person that their intentions are this or that they believe this because they themselves know it's bullshit, right? Um, Self-sacrifice that goes unrequited is another one. They also have a great fear of abandonment, and this ties into always trying to look perfect. Because they're so afraid of being abandoned and rejected, they do their best to try to at least appear to be perfect. They believe that their niceness and respect for women makes them better than other men. That is a big one, especially in today's social climate, where you've got white knights out here trying to defend women's issues when women's issues are for women to defend. These guys will be the first in line to shame other men for being men. Um, they'll be the first guys to call out toxic masculinity, which I believe does not even exist. And and what's funny is that it's like a self-fulfilling circle where women will love these kind of guys in these positions, right? They don't actually love these guys and care for them and respect them, right? Because otherwise they'd be sleeping with them. These nice guys don't get any sort of sexual attention, usually. What happens, but when it's in this social context of defending women's issues and things like that, the women will use these guys, much like they use them for other things like dinners, trips, shopping, so on and so forth. They will use these men to stand on the front lines for their issues, and they'll honor them in those respects, but not any other respects. Um, so moving on, they believe that women reject them because women like bad boys. Well, women do like bad boys, but not really. But we'll get into that in another video. But it's not bad boys; it's traits that bad boys have. But really, the nice guy, they have all these beliefs, and one of them is they're like, oh well, they don't like me because they like bad boys. They complain about the difference between what women claim to want in a man and the men they actually desire. So, I hear this a lot on Clubhouse. If you don't partake in Clubhouse, that's fine, but it's a pretty cool app for discussions and things like that. A lot of things about men and women on there in the relationships groups, but a lot of these simpish guys, they'll complain about, oh, women say they want a nice guy, and then they'll notice that the guys that they actually go for are not exactly nice, right? And then they'll look at this because they are being rejected, and they'll just sit around and complain about it. They'll pick it apart. They'll even throw in statistics and all this data and analysis. And really, they are just pissed off that they're not getting picked. They're not getting picked for sex. They're not getting picked for procreation. And women just don't want them because typically they're really their attitudes are generally fairly undesirable. They are manipulative, secretive, and controlling. And another big one is that they're passive aggressive. You'll see a lot of passive aggressive communication with guys who suffer from nice guy behavior or simp syndrome. And they also use a lot of sarcasm. And again, which is when in many contexts, sarcasm can be a form of passive aggression. So these traits, which are rooted in a severe lack of self-respect and self-love, result in destructive behavior. And what nice guys or simps do is they create a transactional narrative in their mind, thinking that if I do X, then I should get Y. And this narrative can either be conscious or unconscious. And it really just depends on a lot of factors, how they grew up, and then their experiences with people, especially women, moving forward out of adolescence. So a classic example is when a nice guy takes a woman out and thinks to himself that he's going to get something in return, like a kiss or sex or a second date. And this shows up in relationships where the guy does all the things he has been conditioned he's supposed to do, right? Like working long hours, fixing things around the home, helping with housework, helping with the kids. And in his head, he thinks this will make his woman want him more and give him sex. But this couldn't be farther from the truth. We won't be getting into what arouses women in this module, but that's for another video. So let's just stay on the track with the nice guy stuff. So nice guys often fixate on one woman, known as one-itis in the manosphere circles, before they express any interest, right? So before the woman even shows any kind of interest in the guy, he will get it in his head that she's the one, that she is just this amazing person, and he's really just kind of built up this archetype in his mind based on bits of information. It's incomplete information about her, and then he'll get obsessive and develop one-itis. This is usually coupled with a great fear of rejection from the woman, which results in him carving out a nice seat for himself in the friend zone. So to these guys, a relationship with a woman is the only source of happiness in their lives. Excuse me. This will inevitably result in failure and misery because it is very hard for a woman to respect a man who's like this. And if she can't respect him, she definitely won't be aroused by him. And guys who understand what I'm saying, you've been in the game long enough to know what this is. But fellas, if you haven't dated much, you're going to think that her arousal is based on some sort of visual markers, like you having nice clothes, you having a fit body, you having a good job, having a nice car, a nice house or apartment. And while these things are very good, right, they're very attractive things, right? Nobody can deny that. But if there is no reason for her to respect you, she will not find you attractive, period. You could have all those things. You could be built like an Adonis. You could be financially independent. You're so wealthy you don't even need to work. You have a fantastic apartment or a house. You have 3 cars. You have a collection of Rolex watches. But if there's something about you that prevents her from respecting you, she will not be aroused. She might still sleep with you, right? She might still sleep with you, but she will not respect you, right? It'll be sex that is obligatory so that she can maintain the relationship, not with you, but with the things that you bring, right? She's not, it's the relationship isn't with you, it's with your resources, it's with your money, it's with your looks, right? So if you go out, it's like, oh, look at this attractive guy that I'm with, which is then plays a part in her ego, right? And so she's out, and then people look and they go, oh, wow, there must be something very special about this girl to be with such an attractive man. And guys do the same thing. But the point is that if she doesn't respect you, she's not going to have genuine carnal desire for you. The result, right, being is the common trope of the woman eventually cheating on the guy, like in the in the situations of relationships and marriage, right? where the guy's doing all the great things around the house and so on, thinking that he chips in more, that she will then give him sex. And sometimes it works, but that isn't genuine desire. That there is more barter sex, right? And so the result is a common trope of her eventually cheating on him with an alpha kind of guy who doesn't pedestalize her. And this happens because when a man pedestalizes a woman, she has no choice but to look down on him, which is basically what happens when a guy has one-itis. He pedestalizes the woman. So, as I mentioned before, nice guys are subversively sexist and self-driven. And this shows up in a few ways. So, number one, he expects at some point sexual payment for his kindness and generosity. That's a very egocentric driven. His niceness is deceitful, right? He will not reveal his attraction to a woman, and they will be and will be very helpful with her problems, right? Whether they're emotional problems or physical problems. And this usually results in the woman taking the offered support and regarding the friendship as genuine, right? But notice how this plays into the previous bullet point. So he expects at some point sexual payment for his kindness and generosity, but this is a covert contract. So in his head, he's feeling this either consciously or unconsciously. And she's taking it as just him being a great guy, right? And helping her out and thinking the friendship is real. And but really in his head, he is waiting for the right moment. Number three, the trait of niceness for sex is a sexist generalization that basically comes from the belief that women want closeness and men want sex, so they can be traded one for the other. And while this generalization can be true in many instances, the problem is the belief, right? And using that belief to structure behavior. All right. So when a guy um, has this belief that this is what women want, and this is what men want, then it sets up this like A plus B equals C sort of structure in their mind, and they can't get past that. And they get confused when they're like, well, wait a second, I did A, why am I not getting C? Right. So next bullet is nice guys regard women as moral guardians, right? And that women should choose the nicest guy for sex as a reward for doing the right thing. And so this is where we get white knights. This is where we get um, men believing that women are sugar and spice and everything nice, and that women are just like essentially like the good side of the male female dichotomy, which is crazy. Fellas, you have no idea how cold, how calculated women can be, from every smile to every bit of sex to every bit of conversation. Women have the capacity to be extremely cold and calculated and very chameleon like to get what they need or to get what they want. Now, I don't say this with any sort of disdain or dislike of women. I love women, but it comes with an understanding. All right. And, but the thing is, the nice guys just don't have this understanding. They don't realize that people are people, right? And people are basically selfish. And for some reason in their minds, they've come to understand through probably various means of cultural conditioning that that women are just these these champions of moral integrity, and that's just not true. Nice guys often consider themselves better than other men because they respect women and pander to women's perceived desires, as well as their social struggles. So I had mentioned this already, just being a white knight and taking up things for women, taking up the mantle of being a feminist. And sometimes these guys really drink their own Kool-Aid and they believe themselves to be true feminists. And I would say some of them are. but I would say a large number of them are also not, right? They're just copying the behavior so they can be perceived as an ally. And their desire to be an ally is really just a desire to be desired by women. And they think that if they come across as friendly enough, that they feel and understand the women's struggle enough, that they will be accepted by women, when really they're just deathly afraid of rejection. In the cases of sexual assault, nice guys never consider themselves as the possible assailant because they're gentle and equate assault only with violent sexual activity. So, for those of you who think that nice guys cannot be violent or cannot uh, go into acts of rape or commit acts of rape, they absolutely can. But they themselves can't see themselves as that, as a sexual assailant, because they think they are this, Clark Kent of the world, when really they're not. They feel that the natural sexual urges of heterosexual men is dirty, disdainful, and predatory. Yet these guys, these guys have even stronger heterosexual desires than your average player, right? Like all the players that I know, they don't prioritize sex very much at all. They really don't. From what I've experienced, is that players are more interested in getting her mind. They're more interested in soul snatching, right? And basically having a woman want him so much, right? For the feelings that they get from being around him. Nice guys who don't get sex all that often, which let me just back up. The reason why players get that, right? The reason why they get into that sort of mental framework is because they've had enough sex to find it unimportant, right? But for nice guys and simps who don't get regular sex, they are completely obsessed with it, which is a very strong urge in them. So that's why it makes them very dangerous, because they take that urge and they don't know how, or they're afraid to, or they shame themselves for being able to positively express this, because they're uncomfortable with themselves and they shame themselves. So they take that feeling, that natural strong sexual urge, and they push it down, right? And then they cover it up with all kinds of nonsense, right? With nice behavior, white knighting, being a feminist, all sorts of stuff. When really they've got the dirtiest, most like hedonistic sexual desires of, compared to even players, right? So when things don't go their way, they often complain that they've been friend zoned, despite the target of their affection never being interested in the first place, right? And I'll make another video about the friend zone, but just real quick, women don't put men in the friend zone, right? Men put themselves in the friend zone. So, but we'll get into that later. So, just really quick, just to ask the question, right? Because maybe some of you are interested, where does nice guy syndrome come from? According to Dr. Glover, in his book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, most nice guys share a common pattern regarding their upbringing and societal exposure. Boys who are not well connected to their fathers often develop the nice guy syndrome. Sometimes fathers are present but are absent emotionally and physically, because they too suffer from the nice guy syndrome. Other times, the lack of a father is a result of divorce. This prevents the boys from having a masculine role model in his life. And other times where it's like a baby daddy sort of situation. Dude knocks up a woman and he's just not present. Doesn't even have a relationship with the woman or the child. So without a strong male presence when growing up, they end up in the company of strong female personalities. They're in the company of their mothers, female teachers, and sisters, aunts as well, and so on. And men get comfortable treating women as their role models. While boys need a female presence in their lives, right? That's very important. It is more important to be surrounded by strong male role models. So without relevant male figures, men spend their formative ages learning how to connect with women. And while this is not necessarily bad, it combined with the lack of a masculine energy It turns the men into nice guys, turns them into simps. It turns them into guys who want to champion for women, right? Because a lot of times in these situations, you'll hear uh, stories of a guy or the mother saying, your father is shit. Your father's a nothing. He's a nobody. Sometimes she won't even regard his existence, right? Or she'll even say he's dead when he's not. She'll just like talk a lot of trash about him. And so that sets up this scenario in the kid's head where he doesn't want to be like that guy. Like any male that she describes, he says, okay, I'm never going to be that guy. I'm going to be the Superman. I'm going to be the guy who stands for truth, justice, and the the female way, right? And so he learns to cater towards women, and as he grows up, he then takes that and it transitions into his social life and into his dating life. So now he placates towards the mating and dating strategies of women, and he makes himself into what he believes is desirable by women. And then he has the harsh awakening that women just don't find him attractive. They don't find his traits desirable, and he doesn't understand it. He's like, I don't get it. I'm a non-threat, right? And they just can't get past that situation. And usually it takes like a few heartbreaks, and then they start asking questions. So uh, let me see, where was I? Well, this is not necessarily bad, like being raised around women. It combined with the lack of masculine energy, right? No father figure, it turns them into nice guys. So, this imbalance of masculine and feminine energy leaves men in a cycle of seeking validation from everywhere else instead of the self, right? And self validation is, again, another video that we'll be getting into. There's a lot to do on this channel. So, this is how the nice guy syndrome is nurtured. It can show up as a guy who is sweet, charming, and shy, as well as hyper masculine, which, by the way, is an overcompensation for the lack of genuinely guided masculinity. So, how is this nice guy syndrome cured? I had to go through it myself, actually. And I can say that it is not an easy path. It requires a hard look in the mirror and a firm audit of your habits, beliefs, and behaviors. The next thing is to get in touch with your needs. Nice guy syndrome makes men put their own needs last, dead last. And so you got to get into the habit of first identifying your own needs and then taking the time to tend to them. And even identifying them is hard for nice guys. It's hard for simps because they're so used to putting women first that it's even emotionally difficult to acknowledge themselves. And because, like, to them, it'll come off to themselves as being selfish. And there might even be criticism from others, right? So when they start doing this, when they start tending to their needs, they'll get criticism from the people in their environment, friends, family, and so on. And it's because the guy is no longer behaving in the ways that are predictable according to how they've always perceived him, right? So then you must also, after all that, cultivate your masculinity. And this can be done by challenging yourself physically and mentally, right? So do things that are difficult, that take you out of your comfort zone. This also, it has to do with like self-belief and things of that nature, but this is a good start, right? So also spend time with other men who do masculine, challenging things themselves. The last part is to stop giving so much of your time, energy, and resources and learn what your boundaries are. Saying no to small requests is a good start. So, say a friend of yours needs help doing something, right? Say, oh, I'm uh, changing the alternator in my truck, um, doing an oil job on my car, and they ask you for help. That's a very simple thing. It's not a huge deal. It's not life threatening. So practice in those sort of situations saying no. Say no. I'm sorry, I can't help you today. And you get used to saying no to small requests, and then over time you become stronger in that, in being able to say no, and you start developing the strength of that boundary. So to develop this in its entirety, you must develop your codes, principles, and rules, or I call them CPRs. And that will be also discussed in another video. But all the work in doing this sort of thing, in trying to rid oneself of simp or nice guy syndrome, it's very difficult. You have to look at your beliefs, you have to look at your behaviors, you have to look at your habits, and you have to do away with a lot of them. And it's going to be hard because a large part of your identity that has been formed since childhood is attached to those beliefs, behaviors, and habits. And it's going to be very difficult. But guys, if you don't do anything about it, you're never going to change. You're always going to be stuck, right? And actually, the longer you're stuck in this, the longer it takes to get out of it. All right. The more effort you're going to have to put in to get out of it. And if you don't know where to start, if you don't know how to get going, or if you feel that you can't do it on your own, please get in touch with me. Go onto my Instagram. It's the Alpha Evolution, all one word, no underscores, and I can help you from there. Just drop me a DM. All right. Well, this concludes our video on nice guy syndrome, simp syndrome. Watch it a couple times. There's a lot in there, and trust me, getting out of this, it will be hard, but it's going to be well worth it. All right. Until next time. Peace.